Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Fresh Takes with Dr. Wagner. This is where we look at the health news and offer a fresh take. Today, the topic is going to be mold, a topic that Mark is quite familiar with, actually. So, with that, we're going to go to Mark in sunny Bend, Oregon. Mark, how's it going?
Hey, it's beautiful and I'm doing well here, thanks.
So, what's with mold?
Well, I think the article that you dredged up for me this weekend was entitled "Dozens of Nurses, Staffers on New York City Hospital Maternity Floor Report Being Sickened by Mold." And this was actually on December 31st, just here recently, about a month ago. Yeah, so not surprising. So about 50 they say 50 nurses and staffers on a Staten Island University hospital were getting sick every time they went into the maternity ward. And by sick, they meant they were having, dizziness, headaches, asthma attacks, and finally, they got the hospital administrator's attention, and the maternity ward was temporarily shut down for mold remediation, and air quality was measured, and things are getting better. So this story doesn't surprise me at all. What I like about it is the fact that it's being reported and that there's more awareness now, not only in the popular press like this, but also among providers and health coaches across the country. This week, in fact, there is a toxic mold summit. So the internet is abuzz with the idea that, hey, indoor air quality is really important, and particularly as it relates to mold and water damaged buildings. So what's not being talked about, though, and this is why we do this, is to explore a little bit deeper than the headlines. The headlines would make you think that it's just an acute problem, that as soon as you clean things up, that everything's hunky-dory again. That's not necessarily the case. There is a mounting evidence that the long-term sequelae, the long-term consequences of mold exposure and water damaged buildings can lead to autoimmunity and cognitive decline. In fact, in 2017, there was a study out of Finland entitled "The Severe Sequelae, Severe Consequences, Severe Sequelae to Mold-Related Illness as Demonstrated in 2 Finnish Cohorts." What they found was that there was a 400% increase in the prevalence of autoimmune disease among people who had been exposed to toxic mold in water damaged buildings. And autoimmune disease is one of these long latency effects, excuse me. It's one of these long latency diseases that takes many years for the immune system to sort of manifest.
And it manifests in different ways too, right? So sometimes you can't even pinpoint the same. The different people show different things, and you can't even pinpoint the same cause.
Right. So, mold exposure may be one of these induction events that's responsible to sort of a root cause responsibility for lots of vague, mysterious complaints. And autoimmune disease, even that which we understand about autoimmune disease, is quite complex. It can manifest in many different discrete clinical syndromes, from multiple sclerosis to rheumatoid arthritis to Sjogren's syndrome to mixed connective tissue disorders to very vague complaints that aren't easily categorized. So the idea here is that perhaps this induction event is such a strong signal to the immune system that the immune system sort of goes off the rails and becomes hypervigilant. The sensitivities get turned up to 11, and eventually that can create crosstalk and cross-targeting of friendly tissue, i.e. your own tissue, and develop an autoimmune syndrome out of that, which is quite debilitating. In addition to that, there is the link now we're finding between mold exposure in water damaged buildings and cognitive decline, specifically Alzheimer's type cognitive decline with the accumulation of amyloid beta plaques in the brain. In fact, if you've read The End of Alzheimer's by Dr. Dale Bredesen, he essentially says, look, all you have to do to give yourself Alzheimer's is nothing. Ignore things. Ignore your environment and what it's doing to you. Ignore your body and what it's telling you. And specifically, ignore that musty smell in your home, car, or office. And I have to tell you, I was a champion at this kind of denial, and you can read all about it at bioflourish.com in a series of posts I wrote entitled Poisoned, Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3. And I go into great detail of how I completely lost cognitive function for about 6 months, in addition to bodily meltdown and fatigue and pain and all the rest of it after toxic mold exposure. Because the toxins produced by some species of environmental molds turn out to be neurotoxins. And 24% of the population doesn't clear these toxins very well. And this is due to a genetic variability in what's called our HLA genes, our human leukocyte antigen genes. And if you have these variations, it makes it difficult for some people's immune system to recognize and then eliminate small molecular weight biotoxins, such as fungal toxins that we call mycotoxins, or marine toxins that we call phycotoxins. They're all these very low molecular weight toxins that require a different HLA haplotype to see and eliminate. So if you're in the 24% club like I am, you may experience cognitive decline if you are exposed to mycotoxins from Aspergillus, Penicillium, or worst of all, Stachybotrys, the black mold in a water-damaged building. And such cognitive decline is now categorized by leading researchers like Dr. Bredesen as a subtype of Alzheimer's, and it's called type 3 toxic Alzheimer's disease because it involves the same kind of brain injury that we see in quote-unquote regular Alzheimer's, where you have the buildup of beta amyloid response. The beta amyloid is a response to an insult to the brain. So at this point, I don't really think I need to say much more because you need to get out of that moldy building if you're in it. And don't take any porous materials with you. No clothing, no paperwork, no books, because the mycotoxins are extremely small. They're molecular size. They hide in all these porous materials. It's almost impossible to get them out. So don't take any porous materials with you, and then make sure you have the building cleaned up by professionals, a professional mold remediation team, and then get your body cleaned up by professionals too. You'll be taking binders to get the mycotoxins out. And again, I'm talking about the people who are susceptible, about the 24 to 25% of people who are not clearing these toxins naturally. So 75% of the population is always going to be wondering what the big deal is and why we're talking about this. But 25% of the population is not an insignificant number of people. And we're going to be seeing this acknowledged more over time as we go forward, and I'm grateful for that because a lot of people out there that have been dismissed as crackpots, nutcase, neurotic people with neurocognitive and neuropsychiatric problems and fatigue and fibromyalgia and all this, when they really are getting environmentally poisoned, and there's a fix for that.
Yeah, so I have one question, and that is where to look for mold beyond obviously musty smell and say water damage, which would be more obvious. The thing I think of, so when I think of mold, I think of bulletproof coffee and the whole story behind that. And so I think, I've got one of those instant cup coffee maker devices, and my first thought is, I wonder if that thing has ever been cleaned or if it's moldy. Like where are the common causes for interior mold?
Yeah, so Bulletproof Coffee, built an entire business model initially around providing clean coffee because, mycotoxin-free coffee or low mycotoxin coffee. But essentially, what you're looking at there is you want beans that they're water processed and single origin. So the wet processed single origin beans are going to give you the lowest mold count. So mold does come in food is the take-home message there. Nuts can be moldy, coffee beans can be moldy, sprouts can be moldy. So oranges, yeah. So don't eat moldy food. If it looks bad or smells bad, throw it out. Don't be a hero with your leftovers. Don't. It's just ill-advised. And a lot of times the stuff that's in the bulk food section hasn't been stored well by various grocers. The ones who really know what they're doing will put nuts in the refrigerated section because it preserves their oils as well from being oxidized. There's a number of reasons to do that, but mold is another reason. So, just look at the conscientious grocers out there who are not just allowing grains and nuts to just be sort of exposed to the elements for long periods of time and room temperature. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Mark. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, you bet. But I want to end on, I think that the environmental molds are even worse than the molds in our food, honestly. Because I mean, that's from my own personal experience. I didn't actually crash until I had airborne.
Yeah, and that's the stuff that gets into your house and is unknown and festers for a long time until it breaks out. And so
I mean, I was dealing fairly okay, effectively with trace amounts of mycotoxins in foods my whole life up until that time. But that just put me over the edge, was the airborne stuff. Yeah.
Good to know. All right. Well, it's time to do some investigating. I have an old house, so there's plenty of places to look.
Hey, that reminds me, something our viewers may find useful is that a cheap and easy way to kind of get an idea of how healthy your environment is in this respect is to get an ERMI test, ERMI. Just look it up, ERMI mold test. It's a kit that comes to your house. You take a few samples and you send it in, and they'll give you an index and a rating. You can kind of see whether you need to look further after that. It's a great screening tool. All right. That's all I got.
All right. Thanks a lot.
You betcha, man.
See you next week.
All right. Bye-bye.